and welcome to the first of a series of self-mastery videos. Krista Ray, my colleague, will be doing some of the other videos as well. So I think the first question we want to think about is, what is self-mastery? So while it's clearly sort of an elusive or somewhat subjective concept, probably all of us know it when we see it. So I'm going to ask you right now to think about a leader whom you deem to have self-mastery. So think about that person and think about what qualities or traits do they embody. And also think about how do they show up in the day-to-day as a leader. And then what impact do they have on staff, on peers, on the organization at large? So different people describe self-mastery in different ways. Kevin Cashman, who wrote Leadership from the Inside Out, describes self-mastery as the ongoing commitment to unfolding and authentically expressing who we are. So for Cashman, self-mastery is really about authenticity and expressing our authentic selves. Peter Senge, of course, who wrote The Fifth Discipline, he has a similar definition. He sees it as approaching one's life as a creative work, living from a creative viewpoint as opposed to a reactive viewpoint. So for Cashman, it's really about creating what we intend. So another question I think we have to ask ourselves is, what makes self-mastery so important for leaders? And if you think about it, we bring ourselves to every single interaction we have in the day-to-day, to every meeting we conduct, to every decision we make, to every initiative we spearhead. And that ourselves is a lot. It's our level of self-awareness, it's our values, our preferences, our style, our triggers. And all of that has a lot of impact on others. We don't lead in a vacuum. So without the work of self-mastery, we tend to operate from what's called our conditioned self. So much like if enough kids walk across a college campus lawn, they're going to dig a path, and that path is going to be very hard and worn down and deeply dug over time. And the same is true with us, that when we behave again and again and again consistently, we dig very solid synaptic paths in the brain. And those become very difficult to shift. So literally our behaviors become our habits, and our habits become our conditioned tendencies. So without the work of self-mastery, we get stuck, literally, in these ruts. So if you think about an example, if I as a leader begin to behave by giving a lot of people advice, especially my direct reports, then I form habits around that. So, they come in, they ask questions, and my first instinct is to give advice, probably largely unconsciously. And over time, every time I'm asked a question or even a point is made, I find myself, my neurons flying down those synaptic paths, and I'm sort of my automatic reactions. So the key really is about becoming self-correcting, that I can see myself and make a change in the moment, and self-generating, so I can create what I intend. So another question then is, what does that look like to move toward an intentional self? So if we come back to that example of giving advice, like I said, we're probably largely unconscious about our conditioned tendencies. So one of the very, very first things that I need to shift that is to become aware of it, to see myself doing it. And this is why it is so helpful to take a 360 assessment like you're doing, or to get feedback in the day-to-day, because all of us have blind spots, especially, again, around those conditioned tendencies. So awareness, though, isn't enough. I mean, there are probably a handful or more things that we know about ourselves that we simply don't choose to change. And you'll probably get some of that on your feedback. So the very next thing that we need is intention or motivation. And even that's not enough, right? So I may recognize that I'm in the habit of giving advice, and I may very well want to change that. And yet, the minute someone starts to talk, I'm right back into my conditioned tendencies. So to reshift those neurological pathways and to dig and create new synaptic paths, we need a couple of things. We need to practice it, and accent on practice, because we need to do this again and again, day in and day out. And then to reflect. So we're scientists of our own lives. If we can practice and then study and reflect on what happens and practice some more, that moves the learning exponentially. And we ultimately then form those new paths and become our intentional selves. So this is really about manifesting intention rather than just reacting from our habits. So Jamie Rolls, who wrote Learning Organizations, she says that self-mastery is the most impacting. And she says it's the most difficult and demanding, because it's where the greatest self-evaluation and personal transformation are required. So this model we've been talking about is just that. It's about self-evaluation and transformation. So we'll ask you in one of your tasks to think about this concept of self-mastery and to share with the group what self-mastery means for you. And then we'll also ask you to think about and share with the group a person whom you deem to have self-mastery, and what are some of the qualities you see in that person.